move our discussion into free versus restricted trade. Free trade is a situation when goods and services flow freely between nations without any government-imposed barriers. So if you want to trade with Mexico, if you want to trade with France, if you want to trade with China, you're more than welcome to do that. You don't have to pay any extra taxes. You don't have to submit any extra papers or anything like that. So you trade in pretty much the same way as you would trade in the markets in the United States. Like any other policy, like any other regulation, like any other situation, trade will create winners and losers. Free trade will create winners and losers. So when we import goods, let's think who wins and who loses. When we import goods, we purchase goods from abroad and consume them domestically. Why do we do that? We do that because goods are much cheaper if they were produced in the United States. So consumers benefit since more competition from abroad lowers prices. It also actually will mean that like prices in United States, even for the goods and services produced in United States, will be lower because now the domestic producers have to compete with the foreign producers. So overall, we see prices decreasing. At the same time, we say that producers get hurt as now they have to reduce their prices. Now producers have to compete with foreign producers, and as a result, they need to lower their prices, which means that producers, domestic producers, will make lower profits. So even though a lot of times we hear from politicians that imports are evil, imports create job losses, yes, that's partially true. Since our producers get hurt and they have to lower prices, they're not able to produce as much as they did before, so they may lay off some people. So as a result, some people may lose jobs because now our producers are competing with foreigners. But we have to remember who is benefiting in this case. Any politicians who talks about evil imports never mentions that consumers, we actually benefit from imports. We pay much lower prices. As a result, we are able to afford many more goods and services. The cost of living is not as expensive as it would have been if we didn't have imported goods. And overall, consumers benefit more than producers get hurt. We're not going to go into details of that, but it's a proven fact that there's more benefits than actually downsides. Also, when country exports goods, we also have winners and losers. In this situation, producers benefit. Now producers export their goods so they can sell those goods abroad. They're interested in doing that because most likely the world or other countries are willing to raise or pay higher prices for those goods. As a result, producers can charge higher prices not only abroad, but in the United States as well. Think about this situation. If you are producing certain goods and services, and France is willing to pay you $15 per whatever you produce, and people in the United States are willing to pay only $10 for whatever you produce, where would you rather sell your goods? Most likely France, because they pay you higher money, the higher prices, more money you receive from selling them to France. And if residents of the United States still want to buy your goods, they would probably have to match that price. So as a result, wherever we have exports, the prices for those goods and services increase, not only for foreigners, but for us as well. This is something that you probably don't hear from the politicians. No politician ever says that exports are bad or exports are good, right? So actually they say a lot that exports are good, but nobody's mentioning that we end up paying much higher prices for goods that are being exported to other countries, since now our producers are able to charge us higher prices. So consumers get hurt in case of exports, since they have to pay higher prices. What about jobs here in this case? Well, now our producers are able to produce so much more. They charge in higher prices. They're increasing their production capacities. So they actually have to hire more people. Once again, we're not mentioning that when we are in political debates with our opponents. We don't talk about this benefit of exports or versus imports. Yes, exports are great. Exports allow the producers to benefit, they create jobs, but consumers get hurt. We are paying much higher prices than we would have been if exports did not exist. This is not to say that necessarily imports or exports are good or bad. As with anything else, there's two sides of the story. In case of imports, consumers benefit, producers get hurt. In case of exports, producers benefit and consumers get hurt. So to deal with these negative effects of imports and exports, we can use tariffs or quotas or something that we call trade barriers. So trade barriers are those tools that restrict free trade. So with these tools, we can lower the quantity of imports and lower the quantity of exports. So tariff, one of the trade barriers, is nothing else but the tax on imports. If you want to purchase the goods from abroad, you'll have to pay tax. So even though technically we say that those foreign producers have to pay tax, ultimately that tax is going to be placed on the end consumer. Quotas work somewhat different. Quotas limit number of imported goods. For example, we can say that France is allowed to sell us only this many bottles of wine. That would be an example of a quota. Export subsidies is the other way. It's the way to promote exports. It's the way to help out our producers. It's the payment to our local firms to produce more and sell abroad. A lot of times we see export subsidies in the case of our farmers. All of those we'll call trade barriers. So we are artificially trying to reduce the amount of imports and artificially trying to increase amounts of our exports. Is this good or bad situation? It's not great. Economists show that in case of the free trade, we receive the most benefit possible. In case of the trade restrictions, yes, we're helping out some groups, but we're hurting the other groups much more. We are creating deadweight loss when we create trade barriers. So if overall effects of trade are good, why do we want to oppose trade? Why do we only care about those who are getting hurt but not those who actually benefit from it? We know that overall trade benefits outweigh the cost. So overall the benefit to the consumers from imported goods is much more than the cost of those imports. Overall, the benefits from exports are much more than the cost to the consumers. So why are we restricting trade? Well, technically, those who benefit from trade, since they get so much extra benefit, they can compensate the losers. For example, we can say, look, everybody benefits from imports. We pay $10 lower for each single good that we consume from abroad than we would have if we purchased those goods in the United States. Well, let's keep those $8 savings and $2 will go towards domestic producers, goes towards creation those jobs. As you know, that doesn't happen in reality. It almost never happens. The reason for that is that losses are often highly concentrated among a small group of people who feel them acutely. The gains, on the other hand, are often spread thinly over many people who may not see how trade benefits them. That's exactly what happens in case of imports. Rarely we think how much money we save because we are able to purchase goods from abroad. Once again, look around yourself. See how many goods and goods you purchase from that were made in the other countries. How many times have you actually thought how much money you saved because the computer you're using was made in Vietnam? Because the shirt that you're wearing was made in China, and how much you would have paid if all those goods were made in United States. If they were made in United States, they would be much, much more expensive. But we rarely think about that because those gains to us, they're not significant. We don't know how much extra we would have paid. But if somebody who you know loses their job because a certain plant or a certain factory moved to China or moved somewhere else abroad, well, that to us seems like the end of the world. That is extremely big loss, and we are very concerned about that. And that's how our politicians are trying to sell it to us. They say the losses are tremendous. Well, they're not telling you the whole story. The losses are big, but we feel them more because they're highly concentrated among a small group of people. There's not that many people who lose their jobs because of the imports. But they're not talking about the benefits that we receive as the consumers. So since the losses are concentrated among a small group of people, those people have more incentives to organize and lobby for restrictions on trade. So they have more reasons for which they will try to get as many restrictions for free trade as possible. We'll look at their arguments and we'll see how we can respond to each one of those arguments in the next part of the lecture.